ladies and gentlemen, do welcome to the next episode of my Safe Bet show, of course, hosted by the great SBC. And it gives me an enormous pleasure and it's a true privilege to welcome Monica Shafaq, the CEO of Gordon Moody, on the show. So, Monica, thanks for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
It's our absolute pleasure. We will delve right into it, if I may, because you, without any shadow of doubt, have a beyond, I'm using all these superlatives, but they are warranted, in my view, beyond extensive background across a true variety of charity organizations, including the likes of housing, of course, mental health, and we'll be talking a lot about mental health on this podcast and how it relates to gambling and gaming, and also sports charities. We tend to talk about sports on this podcast as well, so we'll do that today, don't you worry, their audience. But with all this in mind, a couple of questions, if I may. So what was it that originally motivated you to join the charity space?
I think it's part of my upbringing. I've always been raised to be somebody who wants to make a difference in society. When I was growing up, I really didn't have, when you get that traditional question, what do you want to be when you grow up, when you're at school? I never really had any idea in mind. All I knew is that I wanted to do something that would make a difference to people. And obviously, when you work in the charity sector, absolutely you have a mission, and the mission is usually around people and the services that you provide. So for me, I wanted to do something that made an impact. I wasn't quite sure, which is why I kind of went from housing to mental health and now into gambling. But everything that I've done, I feel like it's made a positive impact on the communities that the organisations were set up to provide services for. And for me, if that's the kind of thing I enjoy doing, if I can make that my day job as well, it doesn't actually feel like I'm going to work. I feel like, I'm doing something that I should be doing as a good citizen.
As good as it gets. I believe that when I was a kid, I wanted to be a tourist guide, but then I landed as a lawyer, so I'm not sure whether that's great for humanity, but we shall digress. I presume I just love the sound of my voice a little too much. But on a serious note, if you were to look back at the roles that you've had with all that variety of charity organizations, would there be a common theme or perhaps a couple of themes, besides, of course, the one you just alluded to, i.e. doing good, which is truly appreciated? But would there be anything else that you would like to call out?
I think sometimes, certainly as you kind of progress within your career and potentially reach some more senior positions, I think sometimes you can forget the reason why you are working for that particular organisation because you become more distanced from the end user, I guess. So for me, one thing I've learned is never lose sight of that. No matter what role you're in, always come back to what is our mission, what is our purpose, and why are we doing what we're doing. And if you can answer, whatever decision you make, if it fits into those whys, then you're doing the right thing, no matter how difficult it might be. And sometimes there are very difficult decisions that you have to make, but you have to make them with the interests of the people that you're serving at the heart of that decision. And I would always say, no matter how hard it is, that's got to be the reason why you're doing something.
Yeah, no, I have every certainty that you are not inhabiting the proverbial ivory tower and that you're one of the people's champion. One final question on that, if I may, and then we'll start going through everything you've achieved in a little more detail. But in your current role, what are the critical values that you're applying that you've learned throughout your career in the charity space?
Again, I'd go back to our values. We have to be people-centred. One size doesn't fit all. So, we could turn around and say, right, we're going to deliver a service in X way, but actually that might not work for everybody. So, for example, somebody from an Asian background like myself, a female, I might not want to be supported by a male member of the community. I might have religious beliefs that prevent me from doing that. So we have to be flexible in terms of how we do things so that we can actually be people-centred and deliver the very best. So I think for me, it's about understanding diverse communities, making sure their views and their opinions are taken on board when you deliver and develop services, but also trying to do them in ways that make sure that they're accessible. So again, for example, a counselling service that we used to provide in a previous organisation, at one stage it was being provided at 12 till 2 in the afternoon every day, Monday to Friday, but actually it was in the evening when people needed it. So whilst it was really important service, if people can't access it, there's no point in having it. So it's really understanding the needs of your end user and your customer. I think that's got to be at the forefront of everything basically that you do.
I mean, that's what we all are trying, or at least should be trying to achieve. Prior to, well, I suppose you tell me whether that was a shock or not, but prior to your having taken the proverbial leap of faith and plunged head-on into the gaming space, you'd been the CEO of the Kaleidoscope Plus group, which is an organization that provides mental health support and services. Now, delivering on my commitment to talk about mental health, a very, very important topic. So could you tell us a little more about the organization itself and its objectives, and what were the proudest achievements that you got when you were there?
I was there for 14 years almost, so I've had a long history with that organisation, and I kind of see it like my little baby, because when I first joined the organisation, it was called Sandwell Mind, and it was affiliated with Mind nationally. So Mind have a federal system where they're kind of, you buy their brand, I guess, and you can tap into their policies and their procedures, but actually you have an individual local Mind organisation. So as I say, when I joined in 2010, it was a local Mind organisation delivering very localised services in its local area, Sandwell. There were some commissioning changes that came about, which meant that actually competitive tendering was going to be put in force. That's been in force now for a number of years, and it put the organisation at threat. And our organisation at the time was an organisation that actually a lot of people, it was the only kind of social interaction they had with anybody. There was a lot of people that didn't have any family or friends that they could turn to, and we were the only source of support that they had when they had a mental health crisis. So, in terms of the services that we provided, I still say we because I feel like it's still one of my babies. We provide counselling, residential support, supported housing, a lot of training, suicide prevention. We had a crisis text line. We had a portfolio of services. And when you have people relying on those services, it becomes, I feel like, a huge responsibility to make sure that you can safeguard and protect those services, because if they don't exist, actually people go into more crisis. So because of the new commissioning arrangements, we had to then consider whether being associated or affiliated to Mind nationally was the right thing to do, because it would actually limit our options in terms of tendering for new services. So I think one of my biggest achievements was that we actually disaffiliated from Mind after 40 years of membership. So as you can imagine, we had a board and staff members who had a long association and liking to the brand. But as a result of that, we were able to secure more services across a wider region of the UK. So we became a national charity from a smaller regional one, because it gave us that foothold to be able to tender for services from outside of our local area. I think the other thing that I'm really proud of is that every year since 2015 until I left in 2023, we were named as a best charity to work for, one of the best 100 charities to work for, on a national level and at a regional level. And I think that is as a result of, looking after the staff, making sure that they're well trained, that they're motivated, that, that we aspire to their needs as well and support their needs, and that we create that safe environment where they feel that they can flourish. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to doing at Gordon Moody as my tenure there continues.
Indeed, a very bold move that, however, seems to have been the right decision. So It's the benefit of the hindsight. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you, because as the audience knows, I share my questions with the guests, so I don't know whether this was inadvertent or deliberate, but the perfect segue into the next question, i.e. the interplay between mental health and problem gambling, because I dare suggest that problem gambling does not, or at least should not be allowed to live in its little silo, because it's part of the wider spectrum of issues one may be facing under certain circumstances. So how would you characterize that interplay between mental health and problem gambling?
I think there's a huge connection between mental health and addictions generally. Something that our sector isn't very good at, I feel, is kind of highlighting the fact that there is a huge connection between mental health and addiction. We do tend to see gambling and problem gambling or gambling addiction as being quite separate. We have over 70% of the people that come to us have a diagnosed mental health condition. And they tell us that often gambling is used as a diversionary route to kind of blot out what might be going on in their lives, as a diversionary tactic to kind of not really consider or reflect on what might actually be happening in their life. I do believe that the rest of the individuals that come through our doors also have a mental health condition, but it's not diagnosed, so that doesn't factor in our figures. Over 30% of people who come to us also have sadly contemplated harming themselves and putting their lives at risk. And we know there's a huge association between suicide ideation and mental health. So I think, for me, something that the sector needs to do a lot more of is consider those interactions and those links and kind of try and change the narrative that exists out there. Because at the moment it's, gambling is bad and gambling leads to harm. Maybe that there is a case there, but actually the harm is a result of something else that is going on in people's lives, which is usually as a result of a mental health condition.
And in a similar vein, you also happen to be an accredited mental health first aid instructor. Sadly, we only have some 30 minutes, as you said earlier, perhaps 27, perhaps 33 on this podcast. But if you were to give me a brief training, if I chose to become a first aid instructor, or mental health, I should say, first aid instructor, where would we start and what would be the top 3 skills that I would have to learn?
I think the top 3 skills would probably be, I think first and foremost, is to be an active listener. When somebody's opening up to you and speaking to you, it's really important that you are engaged in that conversation and the person who's speaking to you feels like you're actually taking note of what they're saying and taking what they're saying on board. Because sometimes you can feel dismissed when having these open conversations. So it's really important to have that active listening. I think it's really important also to not be judgmental when you're having those conversations with people. It's very common for people who are presented with somebody who might be thinking about harming themselves. So, you don't want to do that. Oh, God, no. Why would you want to do that? Actually, that's counterproductive. What we need to be doing is acknowledging that these are real, true feelings that people are feeling, and we need to validate those feelings, because giving them validation also gives them the security and the safety to then work through those feelings and understand how they might be able to get support to help them feel better. I think the third thing, obviously, is before you even get to that point, is trying to understand what the signs might be of somebody who might be experiencing poor mental health. And there are many. I mean, people could, for example, stop looking after themselves. They can traditionally be somebody who's well groomed, well presented. You could perhaps notice that actually they're not as well presented as they usually are. Maybe they become a little bit withdrawn. Maybe they don't, they stop attending social events or going out with friends. There could be signs in terms of eating more, eating less. I mean, everybody's different. There could be sleeping a lot. So it's kind of understanding what those signs could be and then having the courage to actually start that conversation and ask, is there a problem? And And I would always advocate to ask more than once, because again, traditionally, when somebody says, "Oh, how are you doing? Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine." That tends to be the common answer. But it's, "Are you really? Are you really fine? Because I've noticed X, or I've noticed Y, or I've been concerned by a particular situation," and start that conversation that way.
I can't agree more. Of course, you have much more experience in this space than I ever will have. But what you just said, the fact that we are not inclined to dig into the standard answer to what appears to be a very basic question, like, how are you? But it's got a lot behind it, and lots of us, I suppose, including myself, would go, "Well, yeah, I'm okay, I'm not too bad." But yeah, there might be signs that something might be going very sadly awry. So let's all please watch out for those signs. We shall move on to football,
Mm-hmm.
if that's okay.
Football's always okay.
Yeah, same in my book, although these days, living in the States, football means something else, but let's call it football. It's football, it's not soccer. Anyway, I shall digress. For my sins, I'm a Spurs man, so then notorious underachiever. I'm sure that in the next 60 years, we might win a trophy and a half or something along those lines. But looking at your resume, or when I was doing that to get ready for this podcast, your very, very tight affiliation with football couldn't but catch my eye, especially with Glory, Glory, Man United. So is that your team? And how did you get involved with football in the first place?
So actually, Man United isn't my team. And despite my tutting to you, admitting that you are a Spurs fan, I don't really think I have much to say, because I'm a Wolverhampton Wanderers fan. Born and bred in Wolverhampton, so I'm a Wolves fan. Have been for as long as, well, generationally, our family have been Wolves fans. How did I get into football? There's a couple of reasons, really, that I got into football. So during my time at Kaleidoscope, obviously mental health and the stigma around mental health is a huge issue generally across society, but it is even more so a huge stigma within sports. And men in particular in football, yes, women's football is growing, and thank God it is. We need to do a lot more around that. But traditionally, we talk about football, we talk about men's football. Within that sector, men tend to told, "Oh, just man up. Okay, whatever's going on, just get on with it and man up. What have you got to be depressed about? You're a Premier League star, you've got all of this money, you've got all of this fame." Actually, that's not true. Mental health does not discriminate. So I wanted to make sure that I could do what I could within that sector to try and destigmatise mental health. That was one of the reasons I wanted to get involved. And I'll go on to how I got involved in a second. But one of the other reasons I wanted to get involved was, how many females do you see sitting on boards at football clubs or football governing bodies? And then how many females of colour do you see on football boards or football governing bodies? And for me, equality and diversity has been a huge passion since, I was a child. My parents and I experienced racism. We experienced discrimination. Sadly, as my children have been growing up, they're probably facing more now than I did when I was their age. So it's always been a passion of mine to make sure that, we can create environments where equality and diversity is celebrated. And what does sport do? And what does football do in particular? It brings communities together. It can reach hearts and minds, and it can do a lot of good outside of whatever's happening on the pitch. So it kind of became my mission to make sure that, I can get involved with football in some way and work my way up onto boards where decisions are actually made. Whilst I was working at Kaleidoscope, we kind of sponsored a governance program where people, ex-professional footballers who were leaving football for whatever reason, whether it's retirement or injury, who wanted to give something back to the local communities, they were being trained on what it means to be a trustee, what it means to be a director, the responsibilities that come with that, because they do want to give back to local communities and local causes. And as a result of that, we enlisted a couple of board members. Then my networks through those individuals within football developed, and that's how I kind of got involved initially. So I first got on board with the Premier League as part of their quality standards panel. So basically assessing all Premier League football clubs on their equalities within their workplace and within their teams. I then got involved with Birmingham County FA, which I am still involved with now. I've been involved with them since 2018, and I'm their kind of senior independent director. I'm, as you know, also on the Man United Foundation board, and I also do some work with Paul Callanville Foundation as well.
All that as a Wolves fan. Well,
all that as a Wolves fan.
Well, have to give Man United a ring and inquire into that. But while I'm doing that behind the scenes, let's talk about Gordon Moody, please. The meat, for want of better expression, of this podcast. So you started as Gordon Moody's CEO in January 24.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of folks out there, so I'm speaking American now, lots of people out there know what Gordon Moody does. But in your own words, because I like my guests to share their stories with me, and they're truly appreciated. So in your own words, how would you describe the mission of Gordon Moody's, and what tools do you use to achieve that mission?
So our vision is that anyone who's affected by gambling-related harms can receive a quality, person-centred service that meets their needs to reclaim and rebuild their lives. It's as simple as that. That's what we want to be able to achieve. That's our vision. Excuse me. That's our vision for the future. The way that we do that, we provide residential treatment support, and we're the only organisation in Europe that provides specific residential treatment support for people who have been affected by problem gambling. So there are lots of other residential treatment services out there, but they do not specialise specifically in gambling. They will treat people with multiple addictions. So that's what makes us unique. We also have the only female residential treatment centre in the whole of the world, which makes us even more unique. And we also provide a kind of a hybrid model where those individuals who might not be able to come in for 6 weeks residential treatment care can, over a period of 10 weeks, receive online counselling as well as 2 weekends in one of our treatment centres. Whilst we're based in the Midlands, we actually take people from all over the country, and we have actually had international clients as well reside at our services. We provide online counselling, and we've also just launched our gambling support first aid accredited training, which is very similar to mental health first aid, but obviously focuses specifically on gambling. Like mental health, gambling is not, it doesn't discriminate. It can affect anybody in any demographic, in any kind of status in terms of their finances, whether they work, whether they don't work, male, female, whatever background. It doesn't discriminate. And it can have huge impacts on loved ones, on your work, on relationships. So as a result of that, we also provide what we call an affected others service to support those who have loved ones that have been affected by gambling-related harm.
And to the extent you can tell me or feel comfortable with telling me, ultimately you're the CEO, so you're the judge of that. What is it you guys have in store for us? So what can we expect from Gordon Moody on top of all the great work you have already been doing going forward?
I think you'll see a lot more of us on social media. We'll market ourselves a lot more than we have done in the past. And I think one of the reasons for that is we've been very lucky, like other members within our sector, to be supported by industry. We're not an anti-gambling organisation. We work very closely with industry. And we have really good working relationships with industry. But because of the introduction of the levy, actually those relationships are going to have to change. They will still remain, but they won't be the kind of the financial transaction kind of relationship that's existed in the past. And because we'd had that relationship in the past and we could pretty much rely on being supported by industry, we haven't had to really operate, and I use that word loosely, as a charity, in the sense that we haven't had to raise our profile. We haven't had to think about different funding streams. We haven't had to think about working in partnerships with others outside of industry. And now those are the traditional things that charity sector have to do. Because, as a traditional charity, you have to raise your profile so people know who you are. They're buying into your story. They want to raise money for you. They want to work with you. We haven't had to do any of that. And we've also been very lucky that a lot of the people that have come through our doors have come through our NGSN network. So they've been internal referrals. That's likely to end, I think, in the coming months and years. So we need to make sure that people on the street, communities actually know what Gordon Moody is all about and what we offer. So marketing is huge for us. I think you will see a diversification of services as well. We're very unique in what we offer, as I've already explained. However, I'm also very alert to the fact that actually there is a wider range of people in this space that need different types of support. And whilst we're really good at what we're doing, there's a huge cohort of people that aren't being supported in ways that we could potentially support them. So a diversification of service, I think you'll start seeing from us. I think you'll also start seeing us doing a lot more work internationally. I mean, we are known internationally. I think the first time you and I met was in America. So we will start kind of developing our services more so internationally as well. So there's a lot of things on the horizons, a lot of challenges. But they're good challenges, and I think they bring a lot of opportunities as well.
But I'll be eagerly watching this space. You're talking about mental health, responsible gambling, if you were to look at the UK industry, perhaps, or even the global industry, in your view, because you effectively joined the industry some 15 months ago. So by now, I'm sure you've become an insider, but you're clearly coming at it with a fresh perspective. So looking at that responsible gambling space, in your at least initial assessment, what is it you believe the industry is doing right? And are there any areas where, as an industry, I will use the majestic we, might not have necessarily covered ourselves in too much glory?
I think there's a lot of things that the industry are doing right. And to be completely honest with you, I was really naive to how much the industry does do when I first joined the organisation. I was really pleased to see all the responsible gambling and safer gambling initiatives that individual organisations put in place. I think I call myself an independent insider. As an independent insider, I think that there could be more collaboration. And in terms of what we do as a collective, there seems to be pockets of great work, but not necessarily sharing a good practice. So I think one of the things that would be really good for the industry to do is to make sure that frontline staff and managers are trained in actually how to support somebody who might be experiencing gambling-related harm. And again, like the mental health model, spot the signs, know what the cultural nuances might be for individuals, and what do they actually do. So we get lots of feedback from our clients to say, in some circumstances, actually nobody had that conversation with them. In other circumstances, they had a brief conversation like, okay, yeah, I'm struggling and I don't think I should be gambling. But then operators didn't really know what to do as a result of that. So it's how do we make sure that frontline staff and managers actually know what steps to take to support that individual through to an intervention that works for them.
Well, besides all the important topics that we've touched upon, we're also coining new terminology. Independent insider. I love it. Before I give Monica her 60 seconds to cement her future place in the Gambling Hall of Fame, very briefly, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the outcome of this year's Premiership. So by now, is it Liverpool's to lose?
I think it will be Liverpool. I do think it will be Liverpool. I think they might have a couple of teams on their tail, but it will be Liverpool. And I'm pleased for them. I think they've done really well. I think a lot of the other teams at the moment, I mean, Man United, obviously there's a lot going on there, so I don't think they're going to be a contender. Wolves, I'm glad we're out the relegation zone. I just hope we stay there. Spurs, as you know, have had their issues too. So, yeah, I definitely think Liverpool are the main ones.
Oh, the Spurs have had their issues for the last 65 years, but I shall digress. And now, please, 60 seconds for you to convey your final messages.
What I would like to convey to anybody listening is that if you are experiencing a gambling related harm, please do pick up the phone or send us an email at Gordon Moody, because we are here to support you. If you're looking for a charity partner, then I can recommend no other better charity than Gordon Moody, and we would love to partner with you and work with you, either to support your safer gambling initiatives, or look at ways and how we can be your charity partner so that you can fundraise for us. And I would also like to say that let's work in collaboration. There's so much good work going on across the sector. We are in a very challenging space at the moment, in the UK in particular, given the changes to the political landscape. But please don't forget the third sector, because we do some fantastic work. And I'm not just saying that just for Gordon Moody, I'm saying that for the whole wider third sector as well.
Top marks for sticking to the 60 seconds. Monica Shafaq, CEO of Gordon Moody, thank you for coming onto the show. Thank you for all the great work that you've been doing, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Martin Lycka. Thanks for listening, because this has been the latest episode of my Safe Bet Show, and I shall see you next time.
Thanks, Martin.